For more on the challenges that families with special education students are facing during this pandemic, let's bring in the Council of Administrators of Special Education, Representative Phyllis Wolfram. Phyllis, good morning. Thanks so much for being here. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges for special education students during this pandemic that most people probably don't realize?
Well, good morning, Diane. And first, thanks for having me on. Listening to the stories, it just brings home. I know that all of our teachers want to be back in school. That is just normal. I mean, we want normal again. I don't know that that will ever happen, and we'll be looking for the new normal. But many of the challenges, as your parents have said, is first and foremost keeping students safe, especially those students with the most significant disabilities, as well as the challenges of meeting the needs of those students who have what we refer to as a low incidence disability. For example, students who are deaf and students who are blind. I can understand the one parent who said closed captioning for her child who is deaf, but if they're young enough and they're still learning to read, that's not necessarily going to meet their needs. So we have to continue to communicate so very effectively with our parents to meet students where they are at this really, we say the word, but I don't know that I have found another word to replace unprecedented times in education as a whole, but specifically in special education, it is hard.
And it's important to realize that teachers and administrators are no doubt in a really tough spot here, too. I don't think anyone believes that schools are just disregarding any of their students, but are there any tips for how they can form the best plans for their special education students?
I think that, when we're working with families and, the implementation of the law varies so broadly from state to state and even school district to school district. Funding hasn't always been available in some of those areas as it has been in others. But I think to really go as far as you can to meet those students' needs. There has been this hesitation to send sometimes special equipment home. Send special equipment home. Let the kids have it. We can replace it. We need those kiddos to continue as much of a normal process as possible. And we know that parents struggle with that. And if they don't have the tools that a student might typically have when we're in school, they're not going to engage as much. So I think that continuing to have that individual communication with parents, checking in with them regularly, seeing where they are. There have been some instances where parents have said, I just can't do this. I can't do these services. We have encouraged educators to continue to make those contacts for when parents are ready and to go above and beyond what you might even typically do to provide those services to negate some of the losses or the regression that we might see.
And what about parents? If your child has a hard time learning virtually but has no other choice, what can you do?
Well, I think that, making sure that you're in contact with the teachers. I have heard many, many stories from special educators that they have engaged more readily and more effectively with parents, that they have moved into the virtual site. Parents who are working or parents who are at home are much more engaged in that process. So I would really encourage parents to communicate. I heard a commencement speaker say once, listen as fiercely as you want to be heard. And I would give that advice to all educators to really listen to what the parents are saying, and same to the parents as well, to really listen so that we're communicating effectively with the educators and with the team that's making those decisions. For parents to really be in touch with those related service providers, with their occupational therapists, their physical therapists, if they're seeing counselors on the school setting, school psychologists, the speech language pathologists, to make contact. They have a toolkit full of tools, and parents need to ask for those. Ask for that assistance. What can I do when this happens? What do I do when that happens? So that they're as equipped as they can be. Nothing's perfect right now. But again, to continue that dialogue. I think to also tell some of the successes, some of the things that they have learned about their children since they have spent more time with them. I know that they see them in a different light. They see it's very difficult engaging just with a camera and a computer screen. And sometimes that's very difficult for especially students with attention problems, but to really keep the communication open for all of the educators with all of our parents.
And Education Week's Research Center found that there's a nationwide shortage of special education teachers. The number of special education teachers nationally has dropped by more than 17% over the past decade. How has that impacted then trying to educate these students in a pandemic?
It has significantly impacted. Several of my colleagues across the nation, when we were beginning to come back face-to-face or attempting to come back face-to-face, many of the teachers have made decisions to retire early or to maybe due to some other underlying medical conditions have been unable to come back. That has created even more of a shortage for local school districts across the country. And we don't want to replace with non-certified. However, that's what we're having to do in some situations. And in some situations, there aren't even those substitutes to come into those classrooms. So educators are faced now with another issue that they're having to overcome.
So Phyllis, is there any bright spot here? What do you hope to see happen moving forward? What can we learn from this?
You know, I think we can learn a lot. I think we know there are some students, I have heard some success stories, and I know that they're not overwhelming and it is not the majority, but we have learned that some students have made progress during this time. They may not be those students with the most significant disabilities, but with more mild disabilities, those with social anxiety, with some more emotional issues. And some of those students have really flourished in a different environment. I think we have to really take a look at offering services differently, more individually than we ever have for students with disabilities as we move forward. I think we might not ever be totally out of the hybrid type situation. And I think as educators, sometimes we get stuck in a little box, especially in special education, where we're functioning under this federal law with lots of compliance requirements. It can be very complex for educators. But I think if we communicate effectively, think outside the box, the sky's the limit on what we can really provide. We continue to advocate for more funding as well. And we want our parents to join us in that advocacy to fund special education as promised when it was first passed and enacted with Public Law 94-142.
All right. Phyllis Wolfram from the Council of Administrators of Special Education. Phyllis, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.